Okay, I'm going to go back to sharing the screen and
Hello.
hello.
Hi. Sorry I missed the other call. Orvin Bro.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead,
Hi.
Orville.
Um, what was the question again?
I was just asking just to welcome yourself, meaning just
Okay.
give me a context of where you work and maybe you're interested in research. I didn't ask other people that, but
Okay. Well, I work at an architectural firm, Form Architects. Currently going in my second year of masters in architecture.
okay, I see.
So, still a student working part-time.
All right, well, welcome. Hopefully, you can gain something for this process. So, let me just give you the little
Yes.
context about me. So my name is Suzanne
Okay.
Muir. I have worked at UTech, if you can believe it, over 2 decades. So, I'm doing this a little while. But I've just gotten very excited about research, maybe about 7 years, which might be a long time to know playing. I'm going to call the research game seriously. So maybe I'm trying to play the research game seriously, very short time. So you're going to see the context of where I'm going. So what has been very fascinating for me is that since COVID-19, I've had to really pivot, like most of us. And the big pivot for me has been in trying to figure out how to teach research online, which has really stretched me quite a bit. And in the middle of stretching me, I actually realized that there is the options to do things that I never thought about since COVID essentially required me to teach online. So that is basically how this has come about. I don't think I would have ever started this unless COVID had basically required me to teach online. So here it is right now. So Sabrina, who is on the session right now, her group, so I teach research methods and other courses. I teach professional ethics to computing students. I teach foundations of information systems and then some other things. But in terms of my professional interest in the university context, I'm most fascinated by research in a whole lot of areas. So I thought that in terms of having a lab to help people with research, one of the things that we could do is do something that many people can relate to. So a group that I had last semester, which had, is it three students, they looked at the work readiness of university students and just to ring it up. So last week when you weren't here, Sabrina actually brought up your slideshow. So let me bring it up again in 2 seconds.
Wow.
Yeah, man. So you missed everything. You missed even me. I went through your slideshow and I actually mistakenly didn't bring it up at first. And then Dr. Facey Shaw said, were you showing the slideshow? So I'm not going to show it in great detail again, but I just showed. This is the actual slideshow that these students presented to me for their grade. So they had a background, which I'm not going to go through again right now. We soon find out. So this was their problem statement. Anecdotal evidence suggests that undergraduate computing students are concerned about their work readiness. Universities sometimes fail to adequately prepare students for the world of work. Students who are not work ready may find it increasingly difficult to find gainful employment upon graduation. And they had a purpose, and these were their two research questions. I made a comment last week, I'll make it again. I think the first one probably needs a little rephrasing. It says, what skills gap exists between computing undergraduate students and their employers? I think this could be worded better. And then this one, which I really like, is to what extent are computing undergraduate students work ready? The only question I would have right away is how do we measure work readiness? I would have to think hard. We can't, without reading this, we know why it is significant. And they wanted to limit it just to a subset of computing students. And then they had, which is what I really liked, I was impressed by this. So what they said is that they want to not only, which I would expect, look at both students and employers, they went further to say that they would use a modified version of the work readiness scale proposed by Cabarello et al. 2011. So that was, we're not going to go through all of this and that's the rest of that. So we went through some of this last week. So that's that. So what we did last time was that we spent some time, let me just see, oh, somebody else is here, okay. All right, so last time okay, all right, so this is today. So the idea today is that we're looking at crafting a research proposal. So last week, I had started off by saying, let's try to determine how can we figure out what's a good way to measure work readiness. And we spent some time talking about that. But based on a really fascinating discussion, we kind of went all over the map. So I'm going to show you now. So here's the agenda for today. And by the way, this is up to change. So just to remind, since we have new people every week, is just to do a quick overview of the aims and objectives of this research lab. But the main focus is a review of research gaps, crafting and editing a research proposal, which is titled Work Readiness of UTech Students, or it could be university students in general, obviously in Jamaica. Plans for research dissemination, because when you do any research project, you really should disseminate your research through publication, presentation, and yeah, that's the two major methods. And the next step for the next meeting. So that's the agenda for today. Is there anybody who wants to add or subtract from this list? Welcome, Mrs. Blair.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any thoughts from the few of us who are here? No thoughts yet? All right, so I'm going to move on. So AWESUM stands for Academic Writing Education. And I could have just stopped right there, but I thought all was just not exciting enough. So scholar, upskilling, mentoring, and for scholars, I mean students, supervisors, anybody who's interested in learning, really. That's what I mean by a scholar. So this is my frame for this research lab. So we launched it this year. In 2017, there was the first mixed methods conference in Jamaica, which I actually went to, very fascinating. And as far as I see it, if we keep going with this research lab, I expect wow outcomes within 4 years. And I want relevant, rigorous, rewarding research and development. So these are the aims. So the aim is to improve the capacity of students and staff in conducting relevant, robust, rewarding research and development. Remember, since I've been in computing, I'm thinking not just of research, but also of development of artifacts like software, for example. Right. So perhaps people in architecture would think of other kind of development artifacts as well. You know, for example, we have a guest right here who is into academic writing. So perhaps you might be interested in research on how can we effectively teach academic writing to students. So perhaps maybe there's no development, but there could be. Maybe there could be a computing tool that can give students feedback on their writing automatically. I have no idea. Just speculating here.
Excellent. We are actually conducting research and stuff on that area. So you're right on target.
Yeah, thank you. So the objectives, which are rather grand, is not only to increase the performance of students. So the idea is that any student in UTech, but really right now we're open to anybody, any student who is beyond first year. So we're really not looking at first year undergrads, second years and up can come with permission, no problem, once that going to be disruptive and learn about research. And the idea is by coming and even observing, it's likely to lead to improved assessments in research, which at UTech is typically, if it's an undergraduate program, it's the research methods class and then the major project, which for those who don't know, at UTech for undergrad, all students do typically at least 2 research classes. Right? We also want to increase the output of publications and presentations at journals, academic conferences, as well as the media. And really great research would also lead to positive outcomes of society, especially in an emerging economy like Jamaica, both social outcomes and economic outcomes. That's the grand plan. So at the launch, which was 2 weeks ago, I talked about Activate WOW, and the presentation was the whole hour. This is the summary. Work on important interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary projects. Openly collaborate for research impact, and write your journal article in 12 weeks. I just added here after data collection. We're not talking about 12 weeks, including the conception of the project. You need to conceive the project, collect the data, and then you can actually write the article if you're serious and have the time in a time that you can get it published. In fact, I shouldn't say this, right? Because sometimes if it's an excellent journal, it can apparently take, for the top-notch journals, it can take up to a year to get the thing actually in print. Apparently the process can be so long. So perhaps
No, it can even be more,
yeah.
even
So
3 years.
yeah, man. So if it is that you're the early stage of your research career, it's generally recommended that you don't start with the top-notch journals because it takes forever to actually publish your research. Just as a aside for those who don't know. See, you have a colleague who knows these things. So I just wanted to give a little background. So less than a year ago, I found this particular paper which is really, I think it's pretty good. So apparently Miles did a presentation building on previous work about taxonomy or research gaps, and he has said that there are 7 research gaps. Perhaps there could be more, but typically we tend to talk about knowledge gap and population gap, as in my experience. So we tend to say what we don't know, and like sometimes we justify a lot of the project, at least in SCIT, because it's been done in developing countries, but in no developing countries, or maybe in developing countries, but not in the Caribbean. So, but there are many other types of research gaps. So here's a description for each of these types according to this particular taxonomy. So the evidence gap is that you actually can have research, but the research findings contradict each other. So you might have 4 studies that say one thing and 3 studies that say a different thing. So there's not enough evidence or contradictory evidence. There's a knowledge gap. So you want to find something out and people haven't researched it as yet. There's a practical knowledge gap, which I didn't think about until I saw it written in this paper. It's really sensible in a Jamaican context. There's actually clear research that shows that something works, but people don't apply it. So I can give you a computing example, which I've known about for decades. So I used to work at 2 different software development companies, and the one I worked at in Jamaica, but even one in the US too. When a friend of mine from the place I worked, they're from Jamaica to Barbados to do his job, he literally called me one day to say, Suzanne, can you believe that they're actually following the software engineering principles we learned about in school? And he found it so refreshing, because what we saw in reality is that when industry doesn't follow what actually research shows works, it just makes things just not work well. And the truth is, in so many areas, not just in computing, people don't always do what research show works. So there's definitely this thing called practical knowledge gap. And there can be a methods gap in terms of, is the research method you're doing actually the best match to get rigorous research results? I have not spent any time thinking about this area, but it's certainly worth looking at, because sometimes people come up with either better methods and then they don't apply it to a particular research question. So this is something worth exploring for some projects. Empirical gap, where you have research findings that need to be evaluated. So you may have some data, but perhaps it is not sufficient. So for example, let me give you an example. I'm not sure what they mean, but I'm going to interpret what I think it means. So especially think about the verification of pharmacy, any kind of medical intervention, including the vaccines right now. The part of the reason why some people are cautious about the vaccine is because of empirical gap. We have not, even though I've actually, by the way, I've taken my first vaccine, I'm about to take my second. I have friends who are saying, but they're very uncertain because they want to know that more people, and in fact, in Jamaica, I want to know why we're not closely studying what's happening to our people. Even though we could have the data, we're actually not tracking the percentage of people who are having adverse reactions. There definitely is an empirical gap. So even though there's some evidence that the AstraZeneca vaccine has a little bit over 90% effectiveness, and the Moderna might be 97%, it's for very small populations. And the question is, can we really generalize so everybody in the world over that? It's not so sure. And that really falls to this thing called the empirical gap. Then there's a theoretical gap. There tends to be some research that really could have more rigorous theoretical frameworks. And I would say most of us who are looking at the master's and PhD level, this is something we definitely want to consider. Less of a concern at the undergraduate level. Although, to be fair, I also find my colleagues asking undergraduates some really hard theoretical questions. That's also by itself. And then the population gap, which is a real thing. So I actually have a master's in public health, and I was actually literally shocked when I did it to find out that different populations can have different reactions to different public health interventions. And so not only in computing, where you might say, okay, let's see if a particular software tool, for example, does it work the same for elderly versus youth? Because they'll be different, because elderly people tend to use computer interfaces differently than youth for lots of reasons. But in the same way, for medicine and for public health, different populations across the world actually tend to react differently. So this is a non-trivial thing. It's good to do replication studies in different contexts to see if research done in one place is applicable somewhere else. So like they give examples here, gender, race, age, whatever ethic is, I'm not sure right now. But the point is, all of this is really fascinating. So if you have never considered this, this is something worth considering. Let's stop share for a second. Just looking to see.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
So you stop sharing. I wanted to say.
No, man, I'll go back to it. Here it is.
Right. So question is, in doing your research, is it that you choose one of these, or can you choose more than, or one research can cover more than one gap? In that your
on this particular matter, I understand your question. On this particular matter, I'm not an expert. What I would say, it could. There are two lines of thinking. So one line of thinking which says that every research project must have a gap. Then if every research study must have a gap, then it must have at least one gap.
Okay,
By the way, let's go back, because I cannot do a lot of reading and watching of excellent videos on this for fun. There's a small percentage of the research community that actually say that you don't have to have a gap. What you always need to have is a justification. But some people say that when you say you must have a gap, if the literature is such that you can think of something that is so earth-shattering that is outside of the frame of a gap, you could actually justify the research without using a gap in the literature. Because all of these are about gaps in the published literature. Some people argue that you can actually give a justification for research study without actually identifying a gap. So please don't ask me to explain, I'm just giving you the thinking. So, but at the end of it, every research study must have a clear written exposition using academic writing of why that research can make sense to somebody other than just the research team or the researcher. And yes, it could have more than one gap, in my opinion.
Okay then.
All right, so okay, right. So I just wanted to tell the people here, I'm on the COVID-19 health research agenda for the Ministry of Health and Wellness. And one of the subcommittees I happen to be on right now is called the COVID-19 Modeling Group. And right now, meaning the last few weeks, we've been looking at, they built an agency called ECLAC has funded 4 external consultants to essentially update what is called a SEER model to help with the predictions of COVID cases and and deaths in Jamaica, and to evaluate which of the non-pharmaceutical interventions are most effective. Anyway, moving on from that, because I didn't come to talk about that, what is interesting is the same consultants have come up with a tool that they're suggesting could be used for online education, perhaps for students. So right now, this particular free tool that has been created it uses age-structured model about SARS transmission in Jamaica, and it's looking at for in schools whether we have 30% of children in school, 50% or 70%, and you can basically use a tool to vary a number of items like the percentage of people who are vaccinated based depending on age group, the percentage of people who are actually honoring the social distancing. Those are the two major variables. There are actually other variables as well. And then to see, depending on the different age groups, what actually happens to the theoretical projected transmission rate. So I'm saying all this to say this. If I'm basically being serious, any university student who is here who has a little bit of time, I don't mean a lot of time, who is willing to give feedback, I'm inviting you to send me an email or put something in the chat right now, because we're basically looking for a couple of university students to give them feedback on this free tool that the Ministry of Health and Wellness is proposing they want this tool to interest youth and eventually go on the Ministry of Health and Wellness website. So if there's anybody here who is interested, chat. Yes, so great, Serena. So I'll be in contact with you. Anybody else, you can just tell me now or email me later. Yeah, so, okay, great. So next slide. So I think, let me look, let's see who is here. So it seems to me, is there anybody here who was here last week? Mark, were you here last week?
No, Prof.
Hey, Chad, you look like somebody who I don't even know. You're a UTech student?
Yes, Miss Mary, you hear me?
Yeah, man, I'm hearing you. Are you a skit student?
No, I'm actually a student from the built environment.
From the built environment, okay.
Postgrad. So I was just recently invited to this.
Okay, so no problem, Chad.
I'm new to, everything else.
Yeah, man. Well, I hope that I can share something that will help the postgrad students. So what I'm doing is, which I could change how I'm doing it. What I'm doing is with the assumption that everybody here, well, here's the general gist of how I'm doing this. At the moment, the plan, so I go back to my plan for today, my agenda. The plan is to focus on a research proposal on work readiness of UTech students in order to essentially get everybody up to speed with how to do a research proposal. There are many other ways to teach research, because like I teach research, but the idea is between now and the end of July to actually craft and perhaps start this research study if there are enough people who is interested in actually doing it. That's the plan. In terms of people who come, if there are holes, we can certainly fill in the gaps in terms of holes. But the idea is we're going to run with this research project if there are enough people interested. So back to where I am. So, right. So we had a very in my opinion, last week we had a fascinating discussion. So out of the research questions that were posed by Sabrina's group, Sabrina is here, people had lots of questions. So people had questions about, is it possible that the internship/externship program at UTech, one person was telling me, Valerie Mackenzie Holder, she was saying to the group that externship at UTech, some of the in oral health, some of the employers actually for the internship or externship indicate that they believe that there's some missing gaps in what UTech, how UTech prepares the students for those internship/externship opportunities. So I went and read the literature and I found out there's something called work integrated learning, which is slash externship internship. There was discussions about people's perspectives of work readiness. And this is, so out of the discussion, there are many comments. Oh, one of the things that was really interesting, one person said, could there be a link? Is what UTech describes, for those who don't know, the students. So UTech has a bullet list of what they expect to be attributes of students. So when an undergraduate student finishes the degree, they should have this list of things. And then in every single degree, we actually have a formal proposal which is accepted. It also has a list of attributes of that degree. So somebody, one of the colleagues who's a lecturer, said it might be interesting to research if there's a relationship between the graduate student attributes and work readiness. So anyway, so based on the different points that were made, I came up with this longer list. Because to me, work readiness is related to the university educational value. Apparently, it could be related to this idea of the ideal student attribute of a graduate. Work integrated learning. I found out by reading that there's something called research placements. Clearly, work readiness is more likely to happen if there are collaborations between universities and industry. And then there's quite a number of papers on work readiness. In fact, what is fascinating, because I did a lot of reading of just the perusing the literature, is there is more work readiness literature in profession. So for example, for education, where people are trained to be educators, in health professions where you must go through this, internship, for social work, in those, there's actually quite a number of papers about work readiness. I mean, and there's also for computing and engineering, but it doesn't seem that every discipline has equal numbers of papers on work readiness. So anyway, so this is my list based on some further reading. So not to go through all this right now because I can send it to
Sorry, you're not sharing your screen. So...
Oh, I'm not? Oh, let me share a screen. I thought I was. Oh, I'm not sharing screen. Thanks, Sabrina. Let me go again. I'm sharing the screen, all right? Are you seeing it? Okay, I thought I was sharing the screen. All right, so let's see here. On the current slide. Can you see it now? So I was going through this list. I thought you were seeing my screen. Right, so I'm here. So I was saying there's this list. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each of these. So the value of university education, there's a lot of articles. So there are a number of articles about university education, factors that facilitate the effectiveness of university education, students' perspective, value for money in universities. What is interesting is they even have it from the point of view of the higher educational institution. So for example, students as consumers and the value of university experience. So there are a number of different, then there are studies on student attributes. This one I found particularly interesting, the impact of work integrated learning experiences on graduate attributes. So do these things link? But the point is there are papers about graduate student assessments. So it's something that people have researched. And so I found out that about 9 articles, maybe there are more, that's a start. So there's stuff on that. Then work integrated learning, I never know there was such a term. So then there's literature, even up to last year, on the needs of work integrated learning, which I'm telling you is the same thing as internship and externships. So you have, for example, this one calls it field placement. But the point is all of these are about the same thing, about work integrated learning. So there are papers on that. Then there are papers on work readiness through entrepreneurship, education, and experience. This is one of my areas of interest personally. So can training in entrepreneurship and the experience make you more ready for work? There are papers on that. I never knew that people would have actually studied this. So since I'm fascinated by research, I was really intrigued that there is actually papers on research placement in universities, like in organizations. It seems as if they seem to be more in geography. So this is the same person. So this guy wrote a blog about his published paper, but this is this year talking about research placement as part of a professional degree. So it seems to be not much published on this area, but just like there are work placements, you can actually talk about research placement. I was like, wow, fascinating. Then there are papers on industry university collaborations, and there are quite a number of there. So this is where we stopped this is where we focused last week. So the big thing, this is where I wanted to focus last week, and then we talked about many things, in fact, I'm going to come back to this, that I will look at everything and come back to that particular slide. So there are references on stakeholder perspective of work readiness. So that is just the perceptions. So this is about all stakeholders, which means employees and students, maybe academics. I'd have to go back and look at what the paper says exactly, but this is employers alone. This is about also employers alone, the same exact authors. This one is about graduates' understanding of work readiness. This one is about students' perceptions. This one is about a multiple stakeholder approach to it in this country. And then there are others. This one is also about all the different stakeholders. So there are a number of them about either from a student point of view or graduate, or from all of them mixed. Maybe there's one paper that also includes the academics perspective of work readiness. Most of them look at it only from employers and students, not necessarily the academics. And then, so as I had mentioned earlier, there are papers on work readiness in specific disciplines. So the only ones I have on this list, even though there are more, is we have, because I took it from, I just used the ones that Serena's group had for the most part. So we have, I think, 2 on project management and all the rest of them in computing and engineering. So this is about computing. This one is about engineering. This one is about computing IT professionals. This one is about also computing like software engineering, computing again. Right. So I want to go back to this. I'm going to see who is here. Somebody just came in. Audrey, welcome. Since I'm having new people each week, I'm just trying to find out who you are. Would you mind identifying where do you work or study and how you got invited? Audrey, are you hearing us? Apparently Audrey doesn't want to say anything, not sure. Anyway, so back to where we are. So here we are. So the thing about it, no, maybe I should, well, you have this list of papers. 2 of them is about what are the things that predict work readiness, these 2. And these 2 papers are actually about work readiness scale. So there are so many papers that refer to Cabarello et al. 2011. So if you put, and I couldn't do this in a second. If I put this into Google Scholar, you see the amount of people. So this particular paper is what is called a seminal, or what's another word for it? It's a seminal study, as in many people have referred to that paper. So it's a landmark study, that's another word. There are about 3 different ways of saying the same thing. It's a landmark study in the area of work readiness. But interestingly, there's a more recent paper, of course, they refer to this paper, that says, hold on, maybe there could be a better work readiness scale. So what I asked last week is, how do we then, since we have at least 2 different work readiness scales, how do we decide which one is better? Anybody has any thoughts on that? I'm opening up the floor for questions.
Well, I would suggest that we take a look at both of them and then look at the strengths of both and then modify and create our own work readiness scale.
Okay, so
And
what hold on. What you I would agree with you completely. What would be the basis of looking at the strengths? Are you looking at it from a point of view of conceptual strength, or what do you mean? Can you explain a little bit more about the strengths?
well,
Even abstractly, no, we can look at it, but abstractly, what do you mean by the strengths?
well, what I'm thinking, look at what are some of the things that we want to capture. So again, linking it back to what our aims and objectives are in what we want to find, and then look at those strong points that are coming out on the individual scales, and then seek to modify them to what we want to get answered.
Yes, I would agree. One of the important things for deciding what skill we're going to use, or even if you use a combination, is what definitely works in our context. But I think that's really important because work readiness is what is called a construct. Is there any person here who knows what the word construct means? As in, just to give you a context, IQ or intelligent quotient it's also a construct. Yeah, welcome, Chad. I hope to see you again. Does anybody here know what a construct is? So IQ is also a construct. So wait, nobody knows what a construct is, or not brave enough to say? You can even Google it. No charge. It's a fancy word in research. Construct, which is different than concept. I thought we had a couple of people who said they were in a.
Okay, I've Googled it.
You Google it. What did you find?
Construct. An idea or theory containing various conceptual elements, typically one considered to be subjective and not based on empirical evidence.
The only thing I don't like about that is not based on empirical evidence, because a good construct in research is one that is based on empirical evidence. So, for example, IQ is going to be flawed if it is not, it's supposed to be a measure of intelligence. So even the idea of intelligence is actually a construct. So IQ is a measurement of intelligence. So if we believe that there's something really called intelligence, which don't everybody here believe that there's such a thing? So if intelligence is a real thing, then you can come with a construct to measure that concept. So work readiness is a construct that measures the idea that some people are more essentially prepared for work than others. And what I would disagree with what you just read is that maybe I should call it, maybe I know I said good, but to me, any construct that is not good, it's not really a construct. So to me, you want everything from fair, good, and excellent. Something that is a fanky construct, in my mind, is not even a construct. So, but it is subjective. So the thing about it, just like how if you guys are going to evaluate my presentation skills, not everybody is going to give me the same rank. Not true? So some people might say I'm 7 out of 10, some people might say 5 out of 10. But if one person says 1 out of 10, I'll say 10 out of 10. And either it is that we don't even know what it means to have good presentations, or perhaps everybody has a different idea of what they're looking for from me. So there's some things that are more subjective than others, and generally concepts that are more subjective are measured by constructs, if that makes some sense. That's my understanding.
So the phrase empirical, can you hear me?
Yeah, man, I listen.
Right. So I think I understand what you're saying. So you're saying you have to have a framework on which to make some classification.
Right. So in fact, I'm going to stop the share for a second for a reason. And I'm going to just go to, let's help you out here. I'm going to take, hold on, where's my I'm going to take, can't find it here. This is it. Okay. So I'm going to take the article by Carabo and share the screen again. So Audrey is still silent. So I'm going to go to my favorite search tool, which is Google Scholar. People in the library seem to think that there's lots of other online tools. I just think there's this wonderful thing called Google Scholar and everything else is secondary. But if other tools work for you better, more power to you. So here we go. This particular article has been cited by 173 people at least. Right? So by the way, for those who don't know, you can just click on that link and there you go. There's 173 references to that one article. And for those who don't know, if you click right here, you can get the way to cite the article. And since typically in UTech we're using APA, you just copy this and paste. And if you compare to when I was doing my first master's degree, this is so much easier. It's not funny. So that's just a quick little thing. And by the way, if we had done a search for work readiness, just to show you, work readiness, let's just put in this. Work readiness. Let's say we just wanted to find out about work readiness. You see, it's 1.5 million results. And since 2017, 88,000 results. Since last year, published 27,000. So obviously people are interested in this topic. For good reason, relevant. So in fact, I should just take out scale and just put work readiness. So lots of results. So now, looking at this work readiness scale article, I want to look at it. Why is it not opening? Oh, here, let's just do it from here. Trying to open the article. So I just want to look at this article first. So the homework for next time is to actually look at these articles. But that's one way. We're not going to be able to do the whole thing right here in the meeting. So let's just look. Hopefully this won't bore anybody. Would somebody like to read the abstract? Because I don't want to be doing all the talking. Quickly? No volunteer?
Work readiness is a relatively new concept which has emerged in the literature as a selection criterion for predicting graduate potential. Its definition and validity, however, is contentious. To address this issue, the current study aimed to identify the attributes and characteristics that comprise work readiness and develop a scale to assess graduate work readiness. A qualitative study was conducted to assist in generating a representative pool of items for a quantitative measure. The resultant 167-item work readiness scale, which we developed, was validated in a sample of 251 graduates across a range of disciplines. Item analysis assisted, sorry, I live next to a major road. Item analysis assisted in refining the scale. Exploratory factor analyses supported a 4-factor solution with the final work readiness scale consisting of 64 items. The 4 factors explain 44.7% of the variance, demonstrated excellent reliability, and were labeled personal characteristics, organizational acumen, work competence, and social intelligence. The findings indicate that work readiness is a multi-dimensional construct, and initial evidence is provided for the construct validity of the work readiness scale.
I see the idea of the construct validity. So for anybody who is here, including students, would you consider this study that we just read the abstract for? Is it a quantitative, qualitative, multiple methods, or mixed methods based on what we just read? Don't all speak at once.
Okay, I was trying to give others a chance, but I'll go ahead and answer then. It's a mixed method study because I'm seeing where both quantity and qualitative methods were employed.
Right. So I want to be like overly precise. I actually agree it's mixed methods, but mixed method you can actually be multi methods. Sorry, this might sound really controversial. Qualitative and quantitative doesn't mean it's mixed methods, but this particular one is definitely mixed methods. Why? Because the qualitative study actually informed the quantitative study. Sorry, that's why I said that I went to the 2017 mixed method study with John Cresswell, who has written several textbooks in mixed methods, and I go, oh my goodness, research is more complex and more crazy, like not I'm say crazy, intellectually sophisticated than I had ever dreamed possible.
Yes,
And
I
I thought,
definitely
wow.
agree.
And I thought, wow, I was there and I went, wow. And I was there with some colleagues from both UTech and UE. And I said, wow, there are researchers that are actually impressive. Sorry, I actually met many people with PhD that I was never impressed with. And I was there and I went, wow, it's not all a joke. And I was completely intellectually floored with oh my goodness, these people are not just smart, they work hard, they have thought. I was really impressed.
Question.
Yes?
So where I was thinking was mixed method too, and because of the fact it was qualitative and quantitative alone, you're
Yes.
saying that the
I can explain, you know.
No, I'm just trying to, but I'm asking for a reason because I did it lately. I did something like that lately, but I'd never thought of that as mixed method. In that so you said the qualitative study informs the quantitative study.
Yeah. Or
Okay.
one complicated way to say it, if you have if you have one research question that uses both qualitative and quantitative to answer that question, then it's mixed methods. Technically, if you have if each question is only answered by qualitative and quantitative, it's multiple methods, not technically mixed methods. But by the way, 90% of the people in the world won't agree with me because they're not mixed methods experts. Not me, no. So I listened to the mixed method people, and after I spent 2 to 3 days at that conference, I went definitely. I was like, whoa, 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 and they were very clear. So basically, they're saying that mixed methods is much more sophisticated than multiple methods. But most people in the world just call everything mixed methods, and they're like, no, let's just completely separate multiple methods from mixed methods. But by the way, some people just call everything mixed methods. So just because you use qualitative and quantitative, according to some people,
it's not the other way around. So quantitative, qualitative informs quantitative, not
it doesn't
quantitative.
matter. No, it can be any way.
The way around, okay.
A mixed method, there are many different types, and I'm not prepared to just off the top of my head just I mean I could Google it for 2 seconds. I'll just show you. I Google it for 2 seconds. So there are types. Yeah, let's just give it for 2 seconds. Types of mixed methods. So you actually have sequential mixed methods. So see it here. You have depending on which person you're even listening to, you have like sorry, even within these types, embedded, explanatory, exploratory, there are types within those types. So
as well, and Plano Clark or Clark Plano, they are good sources on the different types of mixed methods.
yeah, man.
They're a great resource on that.
Who is that?
Creswell.
Yes, I just said John Creswell, who I met in 2017.
Yeah.
That's what I just said. Yes, I know.
Yes.
So but his version is not the same. So for example, I was talking to John Creswell and I was just telling him we're having a conversation, and then when I said I wanted to do grounded theory, and then he said, what type? And I said, what type? And he's like, there's 3 types, or maybe there are more now. And that's when I started to realize you can't just talk to these mixed methods as they're just talk. There are many types of grounded theories, of which more than one person have written more than one book on types of grounded theory. So if you want to select grounded theory as your qualitative method, you also have to decide which type of grounded theory. Anyway, let's get outside of where we are. So let me go back. So I'm just saying there are different types of mixed methods. So all in all, you can actually have like a sequential mixed method, a parallel mixed method. So mixed methods can be qualitative, then quantitative, quantitative, then qualitative, both of them at the same time.
Yes.
To answer one research question. So my simplest answer is this mixed method when one research question uses both qualitative and quantitative in any direction to answer that question. That is
Okay.
my simple definition.
Understood. Understood.
So let's not spend too much time on that. So let's go back to where we are, because you know we were looking at the article. Where is the article? Is it in here? I don't know. I want to go back to my article. Seem to have lost it. Yeah.
It's the second to last one. Well, it should be.
Oh, here, yes, you're right. Right. So here's the thing now. What is fascinating to me is that this particular study came up with 4 factors. You see it here? So think about it, guys. When you think about work readiness, if you even think about it at all, do you think about personal characteristics, organizational acumen, work competence, and social intelligence? Which of these 4 do you think about? We're having a discussion here. Sure, everybody here thinks of work competence, but which of the rest of them do we normally think about? We certainly think of competence at doing the job.
Now that I started an internship, social intelligence is
Right.
one.
So what we've been thinking, so when I was a little girl, I would have thought of this alone. Then since I work at a job and work at a university where they keep telling me it's important, I think of these 2. So what is not a shock in the paper, if you read the paper, which I read a week ago before preparing for this thing, is that they said that the Australian, they actually have a reference to a particular previous work readiness scale that didn't have these 2 other areas, organizational acumen and personal characteristics. Now, and then let's go to, so how did they come up with these things? And is it really, does it have construct validity?
Question. This thing called IT was used in the early days. NTJ or ITJ. I don't remember what it means. What it means. Psychometric. That's the word.
Yes. What about it?
Doesn't that help to determine personal characteristics, which is used as a criteria for employment in some cases?
Well, it depends. Let's first go to, before we go there, anybody can just say in their own words, anybody, which I can say, just to clarify, who did they ask the qualitative study to? Or do you need to scroll down? I'm just saying, they did a qualitative study. Who was the qualitative study of? So you see, let me just scroll out to show you. So if you go down to methods, because this is the background, and the participants, so they initially started with 30 participants, and they were HR professionals with experience in recruitment. So what they did initially was they essentially got qualitative data from people who hired people for work. And in fact, they said they had 2 participant groups. We could read it more at length, and they did interviews. So it's interviews they did. So they did interviews and asked the people, and based on going through that experience, so like it's these open-ended questions, they then did analysis of these transcripts. And then that's how they came out with this long list. Remember, if you go back up to the abstract, they said they initially, based on the thing, came up with 167 work readiness scale. And then they gave that to 251, this is not students, as in graduates of university, across a range of disciplines, in order to figure out which of those was actually explained readiness for work. So this first part was a qualitative study, and then they did some kind of thematic analysis to come to this quantitative scale. Then they basically gave this survey to 255 people who work in order to bring it down to only 64 items. And then, and this will take a lot of things to even find out why this is important, once this explanatory factor is higher, that's the better it is. So if it was 100%, we say it's perfect. So we actually want a scale that actually explains as much of the work readiness as is possible. So this particular scale explained 44.7% of the variance. And when they looked at it, they said that there were 4 areas. Now, as to what they mean by personal characteristics, we need to read the paper. So you're asking me, are those personal characteristics the same as psychometrics?
No. I was just, because yes, you're asking what you thought it meant, or what you thought, which one you thought would have been included.
Right.
I thought that personal characteristics would naturally be included because of that
Oh,
psychometric scale.
right.
So,
So to
yeah.
me, when I reflect on it, that's me personally just thinking as a person, I think, oh, these all make sense. I would have thought of these two first. But when I start to think about it, at the end of it, some of the places I work, I've only worked at 3 full-time jobs. And at my 3 full-time jobs, it varies, the importance varies, but at all of them, how much you can manage that organization does matter. And I think at all of them, your personal characteristics matter. So I can see how this just from a, subjective point of view, that I can see that those make sense to me. Because I've now lived a long enough time that I think, oh yeah, this makes some sense to me. That don't mean it's right, I'm just saying at a surface level. So you can then go and read the paper. So, and then what is interesting is I actually have the survey right there. So this is the actual survey. These are all the items in the survey, and they have the statistics. So these are the, whatever it was it 67? And then they have a discussion with literature, which is not surprising. So for those who are not used to it, for this kind of mixed method paper, you would expect, not after the literature review, which is here, literature review. So when you write a paper, as opposed to when you write a major project or a PhD thesis, you would then separate the introductory chapter from literature review. When you write it to publish, it's all in one section called introduction. So after the introduction, then they get into the methods. And since they had different phases, because it's mixed method, they tell us about phase 1. Then they told us what happened in phase 1. Then they eventually get to phase 2, which is where they know that's the qualitative project has finished. This is the quantitative project, and you have to read about it. We don't have time right now to go through that. Then they tell you how they do the quantitative project. Then they tell you about statistical analysis of the quantitative results. And then they actually show you the scale and some statistics there. And then, because of the nature of the project, they definitely need to do a discussion based on the literature. So at the end of the project, remember at this point, it would have been a cutting edge research. Then they now look at this and compare it to the existing literature on the topic. And so they discuss it and compare it to other ones and say, how does this new thing now compare to previous ones? So, for example, I like that they compared to the Australian Council for Educational Research and showed how it was similar and not similar. But I said that these two areas were unique to the work ready study that they did. Anyway, but you could read it. So that's what this paper is about. So I didn't assume. So this is now where I'm going beyond what my students did. I now said, I definitely can't assume that this work readiness scale is the best work readiness scale. So I said, let me go and find out if there's any other work readiness scale.
I have a question before you move on. Just to understand, so they interviewed this HR professionals.
Personnel, yes.
Came up with some, I guess, categories or areas.
Before they got to areas, what they did first is they recorded the transcripts.
Right.
They would have done some kind of thematic analysis to come up with categories.
Right.
So then they came with those categories, and then for those categories, they would come up with a number of items for each category in an instrument, as in a survey. And then in that survey, what they would have done, which by the way, this is typical for a kind of mixed method. I'm no expert. What they would have done was come with this survey, and then they would have to find some way to see if, because, okay, let's take it that there's some way to measure. Let's take Sabrina, who's right here. She's still a 3rd-year student in SCIT, and she's currently working a job, right, Sabrina?
Yes.
Right. And if we want to find out what her current employer thinks she is in terms of readiness for work, we can find it out. So we could give her that actual scale as a real person, and we could actually find out from our employers how they perceive her readiness for work.
Right.
And then we could see for her and many other people what is how much the scale actually explains the perception of the employer's readiness for work. So I'm not sure exactly what they did, because we'd have to read the whole paper, but hopefully they did something sensible so they could see, does the scale actually correlate with the actual readiness to work measured in some way?
Oh, in practicality.
Right, in some kind of practical way. So if you go back, remember, I've not read the whole paper. I just got a gist. And when I look at the gist, I said, wow, this is a really sophisticated paper.
So one question though before. So after they did the survey, they would have grouped, they'd have created a scale or some construct based on that survey. Right. Okay.
Right. So what they did, so if you go back, it's actually all in the abstract. That is why it's always good to understand the abstract. It's not all in the abstract, but what's in the abstract is what they did after the qualitative thing is they created a 167 item work readiness scale. Then they gave it to 251 graduates. And then they did some statistical analysis in order to bring it down from 167 items to only 64 items.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's wanted to answer the sequence of, yes, answer the question.
Right.
It's interesting though.
Yeah, it is interesting. So back to where I was. If you go back to just work readiness, so just put anytime. So I would have come in and I would have put in, like, maybe I did this, not sure what I did. So of course the Cabrera Act comes first because that's the most quoted work readiness scale. So I started to look. So at the end of it, guys, when you're looking, so I've actually see it here. This is the one I found. But the thing about it, a lot of you start looking for things, they seem to think that it's like Google and figuring out where's the nearest Chinese restaurant. When you're doing academic research, it takes perseverance and smart thinking. So in fact, let's go back to what I mean by smart thinking. So let's go back to the article. You see here, you have these keywords. Sometimes when you're searching, if you use everyday words, not academic words, you don't find what you're looking for. But fortunately, work readiness is actually the academic word in this case. But we might also want to search for these other words if you're not finding what we're looking for. But all I wanted at the moment was, are there other work readiness scales? So it's on that. I'm just putting work readiness scale. But I don't assume that work readiness scale will go to be on the first page. But first I do is I look at the titles. So I'm just looking through. This is the factors. In fact, here's another one. So there's one from 2015. So, here's another one. So
if I can interrupt for a minute,
Sure.
the other thing I was thinking too, in terms of the development of the work readiness scale, is that especially if these research is done outside of Jamaica and the Caribbean, there are some things that would be unique to our context that we would want to consider. And I'm saying that just off the top of my head, based on a research that I had to do for my doctoral study, there is a report that was published sometime in 2011. I think it was Trevor Hamilton. They did research that outlined work readiness of UTech graduates, and one of the areas that they indicated deficiency in was in their writing competence, communication competence, both oral and written. So we'd want to.
That's a subset of work competence.
Right, it is. So I'm just saying that we would also look at some of the uniqueness of our situation and then use that as well when we are modifying or working with other skills.
One comment about that though, I'm actually looking to see if we actually publish it, because I'm looking, I don't see it. So you did a study, but did you publish it in the academic literature? We could also look in Google. So
I think it's published as a report.
Like a white paper or a green paper?
I'd have to go back to it. I don't. I just remember the details from it.
Say something in the Gleaner. Yeah. Gleaner, what is work readiness? Well, I think you're right about the 2011 thing. So I see an article in the Gleaner in 2011. Jamaica school readiness, employers, Australia. This is back to the same one. Yeah, I'm actually, so I'm not going to spend the time right now to look, but my general understanding in Jamaica is that we don't tend to publish in the literature. Even in the worst journal, we just tend to do research and we don't publish. I don't know why. It's a sad case. I don't know why we don't publish, because there's so many journals or conferences just to even give a summary in an abstract in a conference. But that's a whole story all by itself. But you're right. But the question is two different questions. And the question really is, let's go back to these 4 factors. It could be that these 4 factors are sufficient, but maybe word competence, the list, there are 2 different kind of challenges. One is the list of things on the word competence comprehensive? And the other thing, which is also important, is if the word comprehensive, is the questionnaire suitable for Jamaica? But it could be that the English is written in a way that typical Jamaican don't understand. So there are 2 different elements. One is, in fact, it's 3 things to think about. Are these 4 categories sufficient? The next one is, are the items under each of these areas sufficient? And then the third one is the way how the items written in the questionnaire, is it reader friendly? So there are lots of things to think about. But you have a really good point there. So we could actually look to see what they actually had on the word competence. Where was I going with this? I was going somewhere with this. Right. So I was saying we're looking at this and see there's actually other work readiness skills. I don't know where I was. I wanted to do some general work readiness skill. Let's talk about Jamaica. So let's just go back to work readiness skills, and we see we actually have work readiness skills in graduate students cited by 42. And I actually had stopped at this particular one. Which one is it? I don't know. This one, work readiness skill, that was this in 2019, and I opened this. Remember, there are others, Let's do that one up there. So the point is, we have several work readiness skills apart from the Caliber et al. We cannot assume that because it has the most references and is a landmark, so it doesn't mean that it is the best. It just means that it is maybe the oldest and most cited. So let's just look quickly at this paper. So this one says, is there anybody who wants to, do we want to actually read the abstract or just look at the paper overall? I'm trying to go with what, it's already 6:22. Any thoughts? Well, I'll just tell you, it's a similar kind of approach to the other one. So it's also a mixed method study. And what they found is they're looking at 4 factors: intellectual, personality, meta skill, and job specific course. So this one would be like the competence one, and the personality is repeated. What were the other 2 again? There was one about social skills. I'm not sure if that is there. And
organization acumen.
Oh, organization acumen. So I'm not sure if that's in the meta skill, but we can just, at a glance, we're not sure if they're the same. We see 2 that look personality and job specific resources. We say those are a match, but we don't know just at a glance where organization acumen would land and where, what's that? I've not forgotten. So the point is we need to look and see where they went, but they did the same thing all over again. So they took 300, so they had a larger group. So they took 362 HR professionals in Asia, and they eventually came up with a 53 questionnaire. So let me see if you look at the whole thing. So they said that it's the According to them, this is the first multidimensional construct. It is based on a sound theory. In other words, they're pushing it at the other group. They actually they're saying that the paper before in 2011 or the others, none of them are based on a sound theory. They're really making strong statements. So they go through their regulatory review. The lit review is there. They talk about how do you measure work readiness. And then they come up with this competence model. Let me see if they have. And then their competence model is intellectual resources, which they have subsets: foundation skills, cognitive skills, and then personality resources, which for them include innovation and creative skills, leadership skills, self-management skills. So we agree so far that in fact, intellectual resources, that's interesting. And then they have meta skill resources, which is IT skills, teamwork and political skills, communication skills, system thinking skills. And then they have job specific resources, the core business skills, and they stop there. And then they go about scale development. The truth is, at a very quick glance, and this is where I say, wow, how do we, there is no easy way to determine what we're going to do. So they talk about how they, in fact, let me go back and find out what was their, they even did a crown batch alpha of their project to determine the validity of their survey. That's what it, when you develop a new survey, in order to indicate that each item actually is statistically sound, you really should do a crown batch alpha, and every item should be over 0.7. So they said that the 10 factors were good because they all were all over 0.7. So it's between 0.86 and 0.94. So yeah, so then they discuss it, and the point is, at a cursory level, I am actually not sure which of these scales would be better, because to me, at a cursory glance, both of them have their merits. And so it's two kind of things at the very minimum to look at. It is but it's many things. So was this approach done in a rigorous way? Another question is, does these approaches, would they actually be replicated in Jamaica? You know, so there are so many questions, but the next problem we're going to do, if we want to do a work readiness scale in Jamaica, do we want to start from scratch and interview HR personnel? So let me stop sharing the screen and see who is here. We had some introductions. Yes.
So why in Jamaica? Why you couldn't have done the same work readiness scale in some other country and use this construct developed in Jamaica?
Of course we could. I'm asking you right now. We can do anything.
Okay.
The whole point is, if you want to start from scratch right now in 2021 and do a mixed method study that's quite resource heavy. So we're in a resource constrained country. And yes, we have, for those who don't know, up to $1 million at UTech for research studies. The kind of research study we're talking about to do this will go way beyond 1 million, just for the funds to do this kind of research study. Who here won't disagree? So I don't mean to give the researchers, just to properly do this research study is not cheap. So the question is, of course we could do it, but is it something we want to do? So there might be a lot of merit in starting from scratch and doing our own exploratory study, where we start off by asking HR professionals. I mean, we can look at the other studies to inform it, and then go from that to make up a scale and all of that. or we could do something where we look at there are several work readiness skills, and we do something else that we decide to test it based on, there's several things we could do, but the question is what makes the best sense to do. So what I wanted to do last week, which I didn't do, so let me just take a second here and share back my screen. Let's go back to yes. So I had these two papers of work readiness, but there are actually other work readiness skills. These are just the two I thought seemed to be the best, but there are others. There are a few other work readiness skills. So I came to this set of questions. Let me go on current slide. So I went to a little presentation today, and they had a part of this, so I decided to put in my quote. Knowledge is having the right answer. Intelligence is asking the right question. So they had this part. Intelligence is asking the right question. So here's the thing. There are many questions we can ask. We can ask what are stakeholders' perceptions of the value of universal education. We could ask what are stakeholders' perception of graduate attribute lists. To what extent are undergraduate students or graduate students ready for work integrated learning? We could also ask to what extent, I didn't put that there, is work integrated learning prepare students for for the world of work. We can ask to what extent are university graduates work ready, and we can ask how could university industry collaboration address skill gaps of university graduates, and more. And a point here is that this list is much more than one research study. This is at least 2, 3, 4 research studies. These are all many different.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah, man,
But
this is what came up from the discussion last week. So
right.
what I did was I just went and spent a lot of time looking at the literature. And personally, the one that I am interested in most of all, me personally, is to what extent, this one here, oops, this the second to last one, to what extent are university graduates work ready?
I must say that I am very interested in working with the team on this, because this is also something that I am looking at too, even in academic writing, because one of the things is that we, for the first time since the pandemic, have included a teamwork component to the assignment. And this is based on two constructs. One, writing is particularly a difficult task for students who are learning writing from a second language perspective, or two, those who are having the Creole language in place. And we know that in most instances, many of our students, English is not their first language, and then the patois that's there.
But then this is only like one question. What are the two different questions?
So no, man, so I'm saying one is that because of that issue that there
challenge.
is,
There's a
that
challenge, because,
right,
students is their second language, and they don't even know it's a second language. That's part of the problem.
Exactly. So researchers have posited that using a collaborative approach is one way of using the writing process to help students in building their writing and helping them to be more proficient. All right. So one, we have put in place teamwork because we want to get students to work collaboratively, and two, also to help students in being ready for the workforce in terms of teamwork. We know that teamwork is critical to organization, and so that was another area. But then based on research, I realized that although educators tend to incorporate teamwork of that component, that is not taught to students. They are only just placed in groups
Mhm.
and they do not understand the dynamics of how to function effectively as a group. And so you find out that most times students tend to have a negative perceptions of teamwork. Why may I have to do this in a group? And it's not something that is embraced, although teamwork tend to yield many positive outcomes. So right now, I am currently doing a case study. Well, I'm trying to write it up so I can get it published in a journal by the end of the summer, as to based on what I have done since semester one. I have actually taught, because my doctoral degree is in leadership, so I did extensive study on teamwork and how to get teamwork to be functional and successful. So I have actually taught each week. I teach them how to work in groups, what are the effective qualities, and then have students evaluate their peers and all of that. So that is also something that I am currently working on, to also make recommendations that educators not only have a group component, but actually guide students on how to function effectively in cohesive units, etc., so that teamwork can be more appreciated and embraced. And also when they go out in the workforce, they can also function effectively in teams. So this paper here, this research study overall is something that I'm really interested in. Somehow I missed it last week because I made a note of it and then I only remembered after the time passed. And so I made sure I put it in my calendar this week so I did not miss the time. But it would be good though that we don't have different members of the team come in at different intervals if we really want to move forward with something like this, which I believe is something that is really needed and can yield some positive outcomes. It would be good if we have some members who are really dedicated in
That would be good.
putting this research forward if we want to accomplish anything from a session like this. Because as I said, I am really intrigued by what I'm hearing so far, and I'd really love to be a part of the team. I just wish that persons who plan to be a part of the team, they take this as a serious effort. I mean, 2 hours each week, that's a lot. And so we want to ensure that we could accomplish things like that. And I really also like the objectives that you outlined, because I think I mentioned it to the research coordinator of my faculty that um, I did my program abroad, and what I realized is that every year a number of the universities, they have undergraduate research conferences where students get an opportunity to present their research, and then of course it's usually in tandem with their faculty acting as the supervisor and working with them. And if we want to promote the culture of research, especially students who plan to move on from the undergraduate to the graduate level, then this is something that is definitely welcome. So I really like the vision for this project, and I'd really like to.
Right. This is probably my focus. What are the students' perception of work readiness, and to what extent are university graduates work ready? So, by the way, I in the what do you call it? The launch 2 weeks ago, I actually spent time on the literature on what is called undergraduate research experiences. So there's actually a
Right.
lot of literature on.
Yes.
There are two types. So there's CURE and URE. So undergraduate research experiences is a study of any research for undergraduate students, but that is for grade. But the no course, sorry, CURE. So CURE is course-based undergraduate research experience, and then there are a number of non-graded research experiences, which are normally just called undergraduate research experiences, that happens in the summer, which are usually for the US sponsored by, I can't remember, maybe National Science Foundation, probably. And there are quite a number of papers on that shows that there is a correlation between those kind of the rich experiences that students have in those summer programs. And so basically I just decided that I would have a go. So this is me having a go. And I said, well, let's have a go. Let's do a real research project and let's see if we can carry it forward. That's what I'm doing. So
Excellent.
the question is, so see, the next thing I have, basically I'm really at the end of today. So what I have next is just to talk about the top publications. So, you know, in Google, so you may or may not know, in Google Scholar, you can look at a list of publications, and really it's just a number of few things you can do. Either you look at the journals that you tend to cite in your paper and you choose one of them, or you look at the top publications. So since this one is on higher education, we could look at higher education. I could just bring this up in the Google Scholar. You could look at, remember, you can disseminate research in academic conferences, and I just did this is the first one I found. It's a long list of conferences that's happening across the world in education, and clearly when we do research, you want to not only do it for the scholars, you also want to distribute your research in the media as well. So that's what this was, and just to show everybody, just for the second, let me go back to my slideshow. Where is it here? And let's cut and paste it. Oops, why am I not cutting and pasting it right? So, what I really want to know right now is of people who are here. Some people may just be interested in just coming and, you know, watching what is going on. I would love to know of those who are still here who would like to be an active participant in addition to myself and Tashiko, is that your name?
Yes.
And perhaps Sabrina. So Sabrina Paul, actually, she did a research project on this, and she did not want to do it for her major project because she's a computer science student, and this is not really a computer science project. Even with how she had put it together, I agree with her. Yes, Carleen, are you saying you want to talk, or you just want to say?
Yes, I'm just saying that I would want to be a part of the project.
Okay, wonderful. Is there anybody else? I'm kind of curious, Miss Wayne,
Yes.
from Bureau Standards. Any thoughts?
Well, is the project about work readiness?
Well, okay. So I'm doing two things at the moment, and there's so many possibilities. My idea is to have one study that I carry through this lab through the summer, maybe till the end of the year. Personally, Suzanne Muir has many interests. I actually have 3 masters. I have many research interests. My personal primary research interest is actually digital health. So I'm interested in interventions related to improving health. That's actually my #1 research interest. I also have interest in technology, entrepreneurship. I have many research interests. However, I was thinking that in any particular research group, you can only focus on one thing. So you're here. What is your research interest, if any? You're here. What's your thoughts?
Okay, well, I was invited, or was asked, suggested that I could come, but I think I came initially to just I thought it was about tips and how to write proposals, academic writing, those kind of things. So I thought it was an ongoing lab about, how to improve your skills in certain areas.
Yeah, so I actually have that on Wednesdays, sort of for the major project students.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'm currently the major project coordinator for the final year students who are doing their research project. So for example, this Wednesday, in fact, you're welcome to come. This Wednesday, we're doing a series of presentations about how to the students all have to do a oral presentation early July. So we're three of us, including me being one. We're doing presentations about how to present chapter 4 and 5. So we're actually doing a workshop on how to do chapters 4 and 5 as a summary. So at the moment, I'm actually open for this to be anything. So this research lab could include presentations on, how to do chapter 1, how to do chapter 2 literature review, and all of that. But I am seeing it more as any of those things I will do depending on who's in the team. So if in the team we have people who are saying, yeah, well, we need something on this, then we could do a presentation on that.
Okay. Also, it's ongoing and it's there. It depends. So so is it that you could have a major project that you're working on while you still do the other things, or you want to do one or the other?
Well, since I've never done this before, so what actually happened is that we actually had a series of presentations for staff in my department, starting in April, where because there are some weaknesses among some staff, we actually internally made presentations to the staff, and we were basically at 80% complete. We were trying to upgrade the skills of staff to improve the general supervision of students. Then we also did presentations to students. So we've actually been making a lot of presentations, and those are also recorded. So we made presentations, and then this is my sort of part 2 where I said, okay, let's see. I was going to try something like what is called the undergraduate research experience / as in I find it for anybody doing research, let's do a real research project over the summer, because across the world, the time that academics have the most time, remember, academics have the most time and students have the most time to do research is when they're not teaching.
Okay, then.
So, but the point is, if, for example, of the people who are going to be coming, a group of us can say we're going to do a 20-minute or a 30-minute on this topic to bring everybody up to speed, that can be part of the thing. So if we want to go back and say, let's do a 20-minute presentation next week on the introductory chapter, we can certainly do that. It really depends on who is here,
right,
and what are the needs. So I'm just saying, I do that all the time. So since I do that all the time as part of my JOB, I was just saying, let's press on with a project, because I want to do a project here that will go all the way to publication. And I think that this is one of the many that across the university could be interesting. That's why I went with the work readiness.
Okay. Well,
so I'm kind of curious. So since you said, what kinds of presentations would be useful to you?
At this point, I am not particularly sure of any specifics. I just came to that. What does that mean?
Okay.
So
you're just curious. So you come and you find what is going on.
Yeah. If I have a need, definitely I can reach out to you and let you know.
Okay.
You can. But if you have a project that you're working on, as I say, I'm into standards, so I also, well, I'm very busy. I like everybody's busy, but I think I'm into standards development and how standards impact on the economy and any subject area like medicine or whichever. So if you're doing something on a project, then I would be interested from the point of view of that angle or any other that angle that could impact on the subject area.
Right, but when I remember when I was at the Bureau of Standards, when I had never ever heard about these standards, for example, finding out that Jamaica has a standard for cement and standard for steel and a long list of things, it was about 100 at the time. I had no idea that there was any standards, and I was like, I'm sorry, I knew of the Bureau of Standards, but I didn't know it.
Standard for telemedicine right now, I think.
What's that? There is a standard?
We're looking at standards for telemedicine, for everything. There are about 6,000 standards in the world. I mean, there's standards for everything.
Okay. And do they have standards for mobile health interventions?
Mobile health interventions.
That's actually different than telemedicine. So telemedicine is actually delivering medicine to people remotely. I personally have interest in delivering of public health intervention through mobile devices. So for example, let's just take where we are right now in the pandemic. Like, you know that people are doing less physical activity. You know that people are not complying with the general basic protocols in COVID. We know that people have severe mental health problems, right? Apart from telemedicine, there are ways that you could say, what can we do through mobile devices to improve the overall mental health of people? And since it is possible that those things could harm, maybe standards are important. I don't know. But I've never thought about it until just now that we're talking.
Well, As I
I
say, if
don't
you
know if that is research or something where people just sit down and just think through what the stands would be. But
no,
certainly, I would be intrigued if that was something. Since I'm not a health professional, I just have a master's in public health. I, but yeah, certainly if it's along that line, I'd be intrigued
well,
with
as I said, in the subject area, choose.
yes.
I could research and find out what angle standards could be used for
Okay.
in it and let you know. That's what.
Well, the thing back to the work readiness, it seems to me that especially in the occupations are called professions, which would include medicine, which would include engineering, which would include social work, maybe psychology, ones that you need to not only have a degree but also meet some kind of, you know, normally a test or something. Those all have some kind of standards. You know, there's certain occupations that there's a standard for that occupation, where there are lots of occupations where at the moment, as far as I know, there are no clear measurable standards. Am I correct?
Occupations or subject areas.
No, occupation, not about subject areas.
Oh, yes, occupations in terms of professional
No, not every occupation is a profession. So actually, I've studied this, by the way. So
Okay.
most occupations are not professions. Professions have a long list of things. Professions are occupations that have not only normally has a code of conduct. There is a clear way to be certified in that occupation, and if you're not supposed to practice that profession. That's why there's a very subset of occupations is professions. So, for example, I'm an occupation that's not a profession, not really. To be a university educator, there's not no global standard. Yeah, it's generally expected that you have a master's or a PhD, but it's as to whether it's a profession is debatable.
Okay. Yes.
Same
Well,
with for
let me,
computing, it's a completely similar. It's a quasi profession, because even though you need a high level of education to be a excellent software engineer, for example, there's no certification that is minimal to practice, even though software engineering can be safety critical and lead to death. Because there have
right,
been instances where software engineering actually leads to death of people, by the way. I actually
right.
teach it, so I know this. So, yeah, something saying a few occupations have standards for
Okay.
people to practice, whereas most occupations,
Don't.
as far as I know, have no standards. Let me say it very carefully.
Yeah, man, that is very possible. I can't say for definitely for yes or no, but I do know of some. So I
Yes.
would say yes, it
Yeah, man.
is like that. So we're trying to do one at the bureau right now. Two, three.
Right. So what I would love to do, that's my email in the chat, is I would love to, I had a registration, I could send it in the chat again. So let me see, where's my registration? I have a registration. Let me bring up my thing from last week. Yeah, last week. Yeah, this was last week. Where is it? Just looking for my registration page. Where is it? No, not there either. Oh, here it is. So this is my registration. Okay, copy. So anybody here who would like to join this, basically what this is this going to chat? Yes, here. So this is my online form to register, but you can also email me. So you can either register or email me or tell me right now. So I know that Carlene Barton, Sabrina Powell, Tashika, who I don't have your email. Firstly, you can always tell me afterwards since you work in Skit. I still don't know who Audrey is because she hasn't introduced herself. And Julia, you're welcome to just continue to visit and see what you think of what's happening. No problem. Because we're going to continue to use the same link. Yeah, so that's where it is. Because to me, what I would really like people to do before we come next week is I can send you not just a meeting link, but also these references for you to read through and do some assessment before we come next week. That's the only way we can actually make progress.
Definitely agree with that.
Right. So
I have copied your mail and I will be sending you something soon.
okay, great, no problem. So you don't, if you don't feel like, oh, not this. If you don't feel like filling out the thing, you don't have to. So let me go back to this. No, not this one. It's this one. Right. So, right. And then, so my next step for next week, what's in the chat? What is this? Oh, you give me your email. Great. So for my last thing that I had in my chat for next week is I was saying, let's read the literature in order to clarify and narrow our research focus. We already have a tentative research proposal because Sabrina et al., 3 students actually wrote a research proposal. In fact, let me just ask Sabrina specifically. Sabrina, you still there, right?
Yes, I am.
Yes, my thinking was to build on your research proposal. Meaning we could do it one of two ways. So I was thinking of adding the 3 of you, including the 2 who are not there, into the research proposal going forward. Or we could start from scratch. It doesn't matter to me one way or the other. But I was thinking that it might be easier to start with your research proposal, but we certainly would need permission from all 3 of you. And I'm good to start from scratch, because I know I can do that. Just it's really a matter of what we're going to do. So I could actually show everybody here, but I certainly wouldn't want to be. I can certainly, there's no breeze just to send what you have done to other people. But if you want to be editing your stuff, it has to be that you are included. If you don't do that, that's called plagiarism. So we have to think about whether as a group we want to be starting research proposal from scratch or we want to be editing yours. At any rate, to me, my biggest question is really the methods. Because we need to, the problem really is not what is the research question. The biggest problem is what method are we going to use? Are we going to use mixed methods? Are we going to use a combination of the existing work readiness scale? How are we going to do that? And then the next step is the ethics application. Are we going to only look at students? Are we going to look at students and employers to determine work readiness? And we have to have instruments for each participant group. So that is where I was with this. So let me stop my share. Yeah, so that's where I was, and we're at 4 minutes to 7 at the end of so basically I'm going to assume that everybody except for Audrey who hasn't said anything. So Miss Dewey, should I send you the stuff as well?
Let's see. If I cannot manage, I'll tell you next week.
Yeah, man. I mean, sending you don't mean that you're going to read it. Sending you, I just want to know if I should send you. I believe.
Yeah, man, send me.
Yeah, man. Just want to know if that's me that you want me to send you things.
Yes.
Right. So my big question here is to go back to. Let me make sure I'm sharing the screen. So my big question is based on discussion. So today, I think that I am thinking that the focus might be what are students' perceptions of work readiness. You know why I say that? Because what I liked about what Timur just said is about the whole thing. Because I was the same thing. When I was 18, I did engineering and I was with some other students who would not do the work. I just got vexed. And I didn't turn in a lab because I said I thought I didn't work for other people. And so I didn't get a good, when I went to my professor to ask what happened to my grade, he said, engineering is a practical discipline, you didn't turn in one lab. You can't expect an A without turning in a lab. Because I said to him, I thought I did really well in the exam. He didn't make a comment on that. He said he didn't turn in a lab. Engineering is applied. But I wasn't thinking about engineering being an applied discipline. I was thinking of, I had these percentages. I did these other things. The lab was only 5%. And I was thinking, how could this, I was thinking the grade didn't compute. And I just asked him, but the point is, I wasn't thinking of engineering classes was helping me towards work readiness or anything like that. And so I think that it might be very useful in a Jamaican context to find out students' perception of work readiness. Separate and apart from are the students or the graduates work ready. So I personally think that these two are really interesting. But what do you all think, people who are here?
I like the idea of students' perceptions of work readiness. Those two, those are the ones that appeal to me as well. So I'm good to go.
Okay, anybody else? I mean, I'm for, we don't have to all agree, you know. I'm waiting for conversation and perspective. We don't all have to think the same thing.
I would also want us to look at the stakeholders' perception.
Okay, so you want to add stakeholders' perception.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I guess my question with that, who is that?
Caroline.
Oh, Caroline.
Yeah.
We could actually have a separate question because the thing about it, yeah, that might make sense. As a separate question. The thing, oops, I'm moving. Okay, employees' perceptions. So the thing about it, the question is so we depending on how we define work ready, we may or may not need this to be a separate question. So if, for example, we're just going to reuse the current instrument, we might need 3 different research questions. What I do see in the research is that this is definitely looked at completely separately than this. So usually when they look at this, this is a subset. So based on how the literature is currently written, that is a subset of question 2.
I see.
You're getting me? So, but so it all depends on what is this? How you define this?
Yeah.
Right. But the point is, all of this needs some exploration, which requires a lot of reading and a lot of thinking. But yeah, all right. Any other thoughts? But yes, I agree with you, Carlene, because this is really important. At the end of it, in the middle of COVID, where we're getting not only have UTEC been traditionally getting less funds than UE per student, even in the bailout, we're still getting less money in the bailout per student. And at the end of it, university, for all of my liberal arts education, where I believe that at university, learn how to think and to be a better person, all that is true. But at the end of it, it's a really important thing for work readiness. And so in that context, not only the students' perception, but the employees' perception are really important. And bottom line, are graduates ready for the world of work? So I guess that's it. I hope you all found this useful in some way.
Most definitely. I really believe that this is a really great initiative. And based on the plans, the objectives, I foresee some great things to come. So I pray that things will work out as planned. And I'm definitely committed to being a part of this
Well, I'm
thing.
happy to
I
hear
love
that.
the initiative.
Wonderful, because the other colleagues who were here last week who seemed interested, the problem is that they're busy. They were very interested, but you so committed. So I'm very happy to hear that.
I mean, busy does not begin to describe it, but then this is something that I'm passionate about. I like the idea of research too. One of the issues that I find in academic writing, especially when students have their final papers to go and write on, and we limit them to getting research from Jamaica and the Caribbean, and many of them come back, Miss, I can't find anything. So anything to strengthen writing and publication within the Jamaican or Caribbean context, I'm all for it. We have too many ideas and we have the ability to write, but then we don't follow through and publish these things. And so I really like this initiative, and I do hope that even more students will come on board and get an opportunity to learn more about the research process.
Wow, I think you are like reading from a script. Look here, look at this. So So like when I shared one day, I was saying that here are the steps for relevant research and development. And I said we keep going to right here, data collection, but we don't get to step 4. Journal
Right.
engagement, academic conferences. Or we might go to conferences, but the journal papers, we're just missing
Don't
that
follow
first
through.
step. We just don't follow through. So even
Yeah.
when we do excellent research, it's including me, we just stop right here. So I have a couple of published papers, but the point is, most of us, and part of it, and this is now where it gets to, where is it? Do you know that more and more papers these days are with collaboration? So
Yes.
between 1980 to now, the amount of authors per paper has gone from 2.2 internationally to 7 per paper. So that's what we
Excellent.
need to do. We need to
We need to do that
we need to collaborate.
and honestly, I'm on a quite a number of research teams, but I decided that this is something I want to do because I'm like, I love the idea that we can do interdisciplinary things, which is something that I believe is so useful. And that's one of the reasons I am making the effort to be a part of stepping out of an area that I am particularly interested in, and also seeing what I can learn and what I can contribute to another area as well.
Okay. Right. So I think what we will do going forward is we will probably do a combination. I'm trying to figure out how it's going to work because I'm basically just going as we go. Maybe we'll do a combination of some basic presentations along with where we're going to go with research. But I've really been I actually like this particular session better than last week because I feel like we might be making progress. Last week I thought, well, that was an interesting discussion, but I wasn't sure where it was going to go.
Okay.
Yeah, man. So guys, thanks so much for coming. I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting. Feel free to either fill out the form or send me an email so I know. I'm going to make sure I record Julia Dewey. Hope I said it right. Email. And have a
I've already sent my email to you, and I also completed the form.
Okay, thank you very much. So everybody have a very good evening.
Thanks, and same to you too.
And Sabrina, I'm hoping to see you next week.
Yes, I'll be here.
I'm going to send you the homework. You see the big homework, Sabrina. We need to know, look at different work readiness skills and see which one or which combination I'm going to use in Jamaica.
I'll be here. I'll be here to help. So just let me know what you need from me, and I'll make sure to have it done by next week.
Sabrina, by the way, in case you don't know, I think that if you don't go ahead and do your master's before you die, you won't be utilizing your full skills. I think you just you're intrinsically a researcher. No pressure, no. You don't
I was at work today, and my higher ups were also encouraging me to go and do my master's. They're like, right away, "You are too big for this."
Sabrina, trust me, Sabrina. I've been teaching this for about maybe almost 10 years. And you are in the 1%. Sabrina, you need to go ahead and think it through when. You don't have to be when it's the undergrad. You can take a little break in between, but you need to do it. My 2 cents.
Yes, I have plans.
Okay, great. Everybody, have a good evening now.
Bye.
Okay.